We are all we have done. We are what we are dreaming, and we've only just begun. If you were ever looking for a concise way to describe our living tradition to others, the way we are living it in a critical time in the world's and our country's histories, these just could be the words you've been looking for. You see, we are not bound by centuries-old creeds. Actually, centuries, that's a little generous. It's been more than a millennium. The most familiar creeds were penned in the late 4th century of the Common Era. We are in the first quarter of the 21st century. Feel free to do the math. Unitarian Universalism was born in 1961, mid-20th century. I'm going to do some century things, so I'll keep telling you things. So its parents were two liberal forms of Christianity that were conceived in the first decades of what would become a world religion. Yes, our history goes back at least to the very beginning of Christianity, when there were many Christianities, plural. Those were born from scraps of gospels and letters long before there was a Bible with a recognized canon, which simply means a collection of books. Unitarianism and Universalism were both deemed to be heresies at the great creedal debate known as the Council of Nicaea in 325 of the Common Era, 4th century. And heretics didn't do so well in the world. Heretics were put to death, often burned at the stake, forcing those liberal understandings of God's love underground until they reemerged at about the time of the Reformation, 16th century. I offer you these century markers not to be cheeky, although that's fun, but to help you get a sense for the journey that our spiritual ancestors made and how the faith that we have shortened to simply you came to be, and how it is growing and changing. So things are about to speed up in our history lesson, so you may want to buckle up. Something big happened to our ancestral parents in these two traditions in the 17th century. They came to America from Europe and England. Unitarianism and Universalism arrived in different forms and under different circumstances, but their arrival was nearly simultaneous. They continued on their separate paths for another 200 plus years, and then their liberal messages began to weave together in good works as they worked together for child labor laws, mental health reform, the creation of the Red Cross, later women's suffrage and labor unions, just to name a few of their individual and combined efforts. So far, we've talked about the important moments in various centuries of the Common Era. The 4th century, when the various Christianities were weeded out and a world religion was born. The 16th century and the Reformation. The 17th century, when the two liberal forms of Christianity known as Unitarianism and Universalism arrived on America's shores, and the 19th century, when they joined forces to effect important social changes. So, to enter the 20th century, let me quote from the preface of our gray hymnal, called Singing the Living Tradition. There's a clue there. The first printing of this hymnal was toward the end of that century in 1993. And I quote, "Our living tradition began the 20th century primarily as a liberal Christianity among Universalists and Unitarians, and ends that same century also embracing the riches of humanism, feminism, mysticism, natural theism, the Jewish tradition, many other world faith traditions, and the skepticism generated by this century's disillusioning woes and wars. For 1900 years, our roots were in liberal Christianity. It's been in just 120 years or so, and truly only the 64 years since the merger, that we have seen a radical change in our theology, being responsive to an ever-changing world. So when we sing, "We are who we are becoming, we are all we have done, we are what we are dreaming, we've only just begun," it is no exaggeration. And of course, if you've been around us much, you'll know that all of this becoming has not been simply theological, although I kind of think everything is ultimately theological. We have been on the front lines when it came to marriage equality, or as we call it these days, marriage. Also, immigrant reform, and proudly taking our place to lift up diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've defined ourselves with covenants, principles, sources, and now values statements. We keep changing and becoming, not because we are wishy-washy or commitment averse, but because the world is constantly changing. And we are people of a living tradition, and that means change. And through all of this, through nearly 2,000 years of exploration, service, and change, Unitarians and Universalists have kept love at the center. For over 1,900 of those years, the center was God's love, believing that no merciful being would consign any of their creation to eternal suffering, and that humans could strive to become more human, because they could follow the teachings and the example of Jesus, who became a full human through the power of God's love. And so here we are, still becoming, still finding our voices and our passion to side with love, to make a difference in a time when each day unleashes new horrors upon the most vulnerable. So this is the moment when we're going to sing that last verse again, please. Just remain seated. We are who we're becoming. We are all we have done. We are what we are dreaming. We've only just begun. We are what we're becoming. We are all we have done. We are what we are dreaming. We've only just begun. Those words have a little more gravitas now, don't they? Yeah. We are becoming as a people of faith, and we are becoming as individuals because love is working on us. Here we go. It's too bad our kids aren't here because they would be able to tell you exactly who this little guy is and what his name stands for. This is JETPIG, and his name is a mnemonic device, a memory game, to help us and our children to remember our UU values of justice, equity, transformation, J-E-T, JET, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity, P-I-G, PIG. JETPIG is adorable. And frankly, what this little stuffy stands for is huge. Too big to wrap our minds around, much less to make offhand promises about living into these values and doing the work that they demand. Here you go, JP. JP, just made that up. Okay. So here's what I mean. So our value statements make up the word JETPIG. So we're going to start with the J, which stands for justice. J is for justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregations, our association, and society at large. We can and should do the work of becoming diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. I can say that this is ongoing work and that we will probably never be done because we're never done becoming. Oh, that reminds me of a song. Okay, so it's the next part that is the scary part. We covenant is a sacred promise, we covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. Gulp. That's big. That's huge. We promise to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. There is no phrase with the caveat, right? We promise to do these things in our little space, among ourselves, maybe in our community. I don't know if the folks who penned, this was a group process to come up with these value statements. So I don't know what the thinking was, but this is big. And we, Unitarian Universalists, according to 2020 figures from our National Association, number 153,000 members. I just need to blink at you for a moment because I want that to land for you. It is wonderful. It is amazing and necessary that we covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. But can I just say we can't do it by ourselves, right? I mean, there are not that many of us. So if you ever wondered if becoming a member matters, let me assure you, it most certainly does. Of course, not all people who define themselves as UU belong to a congregation, so our national numbers are thought to be maybe as high as 800,000. Oh, phew, okay, so now we can take care of racism. It's still so big. How can we be faithful to this promise? Well, the graphic that describes our value statements gives us a very clear image of how. By keeping love at the center. Not anger, not vengeance, not even righteous indignation, certainly not violence. We can live into our covenant for justice by keeping love at the center. And let me tell you, love is contagious. So I chose justice for this example because of the level of injustice that is being enacted and perpetrated in our country and in the world. There are a lot of folks who are playing dirty, and the only way that we can live fully into our UU values is not to get sucked into a game of tit for tat. We must keep love at the center to guide our actions. That sounds wonderful, Michelle, thanks. How are we going to do that? What does it look like to keep love at the center? I don't even know, but you know what? I know that you know. And Marlene is going to walk around to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts. How do we keep love at the center when all around us is so chaotic? And if you raise your hand, she will scamper to you. Aha, there's a hand. And there's a scamper. Very nice.
Well, I think you start at home.
Hold it close to your mouth, please.
I am. Do you want me to?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello, 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 hello,
Hello.
hello, hello, hello. Are you
Okay,
on now?
Who says you're good?
Hello? Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm going to lick the thing. I won't. You start at home, which can be part of the hardest. You know, to look at what's happening at home and what you can do to improve it or diffuse it or whatever, because it's hard to live with other people. It's hard enough to live with yourself. So, yes, start with those who are really close to you.
Thank you. How do we keep love at the center?
I would say take advantage of being with others that share your interest and your passion. And we have a really active justice advocacy team right here in the church where people can come together, talk about what's happening, take action, and kind of act in love.
Thank you.
Run.
That rug's right.
Thank you. I think that what Wendy said is right. You start at home, but I think you start with you, because we all have things inside of us that we need to inspect, like racism, like discomfort with people who don't look, love, and act like us. We're all raised differently. Sometimes it's inside of us. And in order to say we're going to do this and that with racism and love, well, you got to make sure that you know who you are and some of the obstacles that you have inside of you. You know that, then you're going to do better.
Thank you, Charlie. April's over here.
I love what Charlie said. Also, before you even decide how to love yourself, you have to understand what love is. And especially in our country, we have a tendency to mix up approval and love. Love means seeing things you don't like in yourself and you don't like in other people, and being able to accept that along with the good things and still want the best for yourself, the best for that person. And here's the hard part. The best for that person is they see the best for themselves, because it's not our, how do we not put our own wishes on someone else? Tough.
Thank you. All right. I hope that, we have one more? Excellent.
I'm Pat Burke, and can you hear me okay?
I can.
Yeah,
You're
okay.
perfect, Pat.
The environment has always been important to me, and I feel like that isn't important right now when you see what's going on in the news. So I started reading that book, What If We Did It Right? And I said, oh my God, 500 pages. I can't do that. So I started reading it, and I'm a person that always goes to the library, and I have the library book. I said, I'm buying this book. So now I'm going to read the whole thing.
All right. Well, now we can hold you accountable, Pat. I know that wasn't your plan. Thank you all. Good stuff to think about. And thank you, April, that love is not equal to approval. I need to just... If you're approving, you're not loving. If you're approving, you're not loving. You can still approve of me, y'all. It would be just fine. We can coexist. So something interesting is happening in and to our faith. Since those earliest groups of Christianity that identified themselves as Unitarians and Universalists, all the way to the end of the 20th century, so pretty much that whole timeline that we've been sort of dancing around, we and our ancestors have used the word liberal to define who we are. Our principles and sources were created by and for the liberal religious spirit. And we still embody that big-hearted way of being in the world, and we are answering the call to be something more, to allow the spirit of liberation to be born in us. Liberation, our own and others. Liberation for humans and the more than human that inhabit our planet, and indeed, our planet herself. To be liberal is to start with an inward focus, right? And then it moves out into action. We define ourselves as individuals in a process of transformation. To engage in liberation is to take the focus off ourselves a bit and work for the wholeness and freedom of others. In the midst of that work, we are also transformed. It's just a different starting gate. Does that make sense? Just nod quietly and then I'll know. Thank you, April. You're the only one who nodded. Thank you, LJ. That's how these values statements work. We are not the recipients as much as we are the change agents. This is a radical shift for Unitarian Universalists, and it demands our attention. So we're going to touch so briefly on each of the petals on the values flower. I'm just going to read these statements without commentary, because I think it is different to hear them than to simply read them. Interdependence. Let's call that the web of life. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it. We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. Pluralism. Let's call that differences. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. Justice. We can just call that justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregations, our association, and society at large. Transformation. Let's call that change. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. Generosity. Let's call that giving. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. Equity. Let's call that fairness. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness, and we covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. You know, Unitarian Universalism might feel kind of cozy, but it's not comfortable. We have never had the luxury of a faith that remains unchanged for 2,000 years. People will try to tell you that you don't believe anything, or that we believe anything we want. And both of those statements are simplistic and false. We believe what we are compelled to believe. We believe that the only way to a sustainable future for ourselves and for the planet is by living a faith that is focused on liberation and keeps love at the center.